we got a conversation to talk about today. So I just want to explain to you guys the lineup of the show. So first, we got a little skit that I want to show in regards of Kamala Harris talking about the borders that have been trending on Twitter with the blue screen, or I should say the green screen of individuals actually breaking through the borders, as she's saying she wants to strengthen the borders. But we'll check that out. I also got a second segment of the show where I want to talk about Tucker Carlson and Carson and his views and his viewpoint and his reaction, let alone Kamala Harris' speech during the DNC. And then the last part of the segment of the show, I just want to react to with you guys live with Jessica Tarlov being on the Fox News show in regards to her segment when it comes to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and him endorsing Donald Trump. So that is the lineup for the show today, family. I just want to let you guys know that. In regards to that, let me cue the music. And we could get it started, you feel me? So, as we all know, and I might as well get the segment, get the episode where... So I want to show you guys this. But before we get to this, as we all know, the DNC mentioned Donald Trump over 315 times. And I have my notes, just so you know. If I'm looking down at my notes as I take notes because I like to communicate effectively. Let alone, also, I did my due diligence to make sure I do my research and know what I'm talking about before I get up here and start talking about anything, because I don't want to be rambling. I want to be informative. I want to have a conversation with you guys. And there's no way to have a viable conversation if I don't have no substance or substantiate my points. So we got Kamala Harris here, right? So the DNC mentioned Donald Trump over 315 times, the border less than a dozen times, crime less than 5 times, and inflation less than 10 times. So overall, they mentioned Donald Trump way more than the problems everyday Americans deal with and face on an everyday basis, despite the Democrats having control over the entire government for the 12 or at least 12 out of the 16 years that they've been controlling the government. But no matter how you put it, to the Democrats, everything is Trump fault. So I wanted you guys to check this out because I think it's mind-boggling in regards of how she can say this with a straight face and be so straightforward with it in regards of just blatantly lying. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how else to put it. So check this out, family. I want you guys to check this out.
After decades in law enforcement, I know the importance of safety and security, especially at our border. After decades in law enforcement, I know the importance of safety and security, especially at our border.
I just find that highly ironic as you see those individuals breaking across the border, illegal immigrants at that. And before we get into Tucker Carlson, I'd just like to show, and what I did show you guys, and I'm going to show you guys one more time, is what's just being displayed. You know what I'm saying? Because it's important. You see Kamala Harris here talking about and looking at us with a straightforward face as she had made this speech during the Democratic National Convention on the last day of it, which was the shortest speech ever took place. It was about like 35 minutes. The shortest speech in history for an individual to accept that nomination to run for president, right? And 4 years as a vice president, and the one job she had was to control the borders because that's what she was appointed to since March when Joe Biden was appointed as president, right? And he said himself, Joe Biden, she will control the borders. And now with the worst border crisis in history, 18 million unscreened illegal immigrants we have in the USA. Right? And the immigrants are given free loans, $15,000 credit cards, $1,000 and thousands of dollars in food stamps, and an accelerated pathway to citizenship. And it still doesn't absolve from the fact that millions of legal immigrants did it the right way, possibly waiting years to become a legal citizen and doing things the right way, but they still endured the process. You get what I'm saying, family? And how is that fair to them? The individuals who done it the right way are legal immigrants, I should say. They're legal. And then you have these illegal immigrants involved in cartels. People are losing loved ones, to these illegal immigrants that are criminals. And it's mind-boggling how she can say this to us with a straight face. So just imagine how much or any more messy propaganda that she could be spewing out and displaying to us with a straight face like this.
After decades in law enforcement, I know the importance of safety and security, especially at our border.
So like I said, this individual who had the fastest, shortest speech in history to accept their nomination, if she gets into office, it won't be good for anybody. And me doing my due diligence to be the best informed voter on my behalf, instead of embracing ignorance like this and making sure that I read up on things, do my research, and spread the valuable message, which is the truth. And I say that it won't be good for anybody because on top of this speech, she cut off American people in the Democratic National Convention from chanting USA. Now, this may, out of the 25 years of my life, my livelihood, I never seen individuals chanting USA in a Democratic National Convention as that was happening with Kamala Harris during the Democratic National Convention that took place this past week, right? Excuse the music, family, in the background. But the point I'm trying to make here, that instead of her chanting along with the American people, USA, she tends to cut them off. And then she says, oh, let's get down to business. So after she proceeds to say, let's get down to business, then instead of talking about policy, she bigged up herself talking about her family and her upbringing. And not get me started with the cringe of her sister calling her mommy. I don't understand what was the whole point of that. It was just cringy and all. And overall, just cringy. And then her father, even though her mother's not alive, her father is still alive. I think he's about like 85 years old. Wasn't there at all, to watch his daughter accept the nomination to run for president. I just find that type weird or type interesting. Is there some crack within? Is there some dismantlement within there between her father and Kamala Harris? Well, the father of Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris. It's mind-boggling because her father, who's still alive, wasn't there, and she goes on with her identity politics. And I'm starting to advocate for DEI, which means she didn't earn it. She didn't earn this. It was just a last-minute thing for the Democratic Party scrambling and scraping to find somebody, and she was the last option because Joe Biden, when they found out that he wasn't cognitive enough, she took the place to run. The last available option, and her father wasn't present. I just find that weird. That's just me, to not see his daughter take on the take on the nominee at the Democratic National Convention. But with no further ado, family, the next segment of the show, we talk about Tucker Carlson along with Jason Whitlock in regards of his take on the Democratic National Convention. And what's important that he wanted to hone in on was Kamala Harris' speech during the Democratic National Convention, right?
Consider.
So before we actually get into it, to watch his reaction on it, Tucker Carlson, along with Jason Whitlock, on Tucker Carlson podcast, where he went live giving his response to Kamala Harris' speech, the final night of the Democratic National Convention. I present to you this clip that I want to get you guys' thoughts, insight, and perspective on, right? In regards when it comes to him basically annihilating and destroying Kamala Harris when it comes to her whole speech of 35 minutes of nothingness, because she didn't talk about policy at all, and she didn't talk about anything in regards to the issues that is important that the American people face. So with that being said, family, let's get into this clip here.
Consider what he intends to do if we give him power again. Consider his explicit intent to set free violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers at the Capitol. His explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as the enemy.
Can I just interject here for a second? This woman's really scary. She could easily get elected president. She's much more skillful than I have ever seen. She's a liar on the deepest level. The things she is saying right now are not just untrue, they're the opposite of the truth, which is the hallmark of evil. She's an extremist. She'll say anything. She's much more like Gavin Newsom than I ever realized. I could go through a whole litany of why what she's saying is not true. It wasn't an armed mob. There's not one person inside the Capitol with a firearm, period.
That is true.
The only person who was shot in the Capitol was an unarmed woman shot by one of Nancy Pelosi's bodyguards. So again and again, she's telling us that she fought the cartels to secure the border. She's the border czar, and the border is controlled by the cartels.
Facts.
She argued that Donald Trump, quote, tried to throw away your votes. Didn't the Democrat Party just throw away all the votes and install her?
Exactly.
Well, exactly. She's saying that Donald Trump will free from prison violent extremists, meaning like 75-year-old lower middle class women with diabetes, when she endorsed defunding the police and opening the prisons to allow actual criminals out, which is why the crime rate has spiked, to allow the population of Venezuela's prisons, Caracas's prisons are now living in the United States because of her. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, and I don't want to sound like I'm whining or fact-checking, which I hate, but what she's saying is the mirror image of the truth. She doesn't care. She's got no reference points in the truth, and she's an extremist. And she's a former prosecutor, and no former prosecutor should hold power, period. I've covered them my whole life. I've intensely disliked every single one of them for good reason. I think they're scary. They're liars, and they're megalomaniacal. And they put people in prison for political reasons. I've seen it again and again and again, and she's one of them.
So I'm curious to get you guys' take on that. And just to add on what Tucker Carlson said, right? Kamala Harris endorsed defunding the police. Kamala Harris endorsed defunding the police and letting criminals out. And for example, does catch and release sound familiar? I mean, look in California. You know, individuals are literally committing robberies and then getting out the next day. It is not the same night. And posting bond worth nothing. So they're not even being held accountable as a criminal for taking on a criminal act. And she's defunding the police, and let alone safety for the everyday American people should be a concern. And Tucker Carlson here in this clip encapsulates the truth, truly dissecting this messy propaganda and this divisiveness that's constantly being told. Because at the end of the day, he did say a lot of attorney generals should not be in power because they tend to prosecute based on a political agenda. And if your views don't fall in line as them being the top prosecutor, and the only reason why I say it about catch and release is because this individual that's our vice president, who was the attorney general as she champion of California is in shambles right now. And every crime that's being committed, their individuals are not being held before that crime. And she is defunding the police, let alone promoting a whole. It just she's promoting brokenness. The same way the disaster of this Democratic National Convention was, with Democrats protesting Democrats. That says a lot, because at the end of the day, she advocates and promotes for destruction. Let alone as they were scrambling and scraping to come together and also put in line their whole convention that they had, which she talked about nothing but her and her family upbringing. And he hit it right on the nail. And the reason why I believe Tucker Carlson wouldn't run for president is because the cleanup of so many presidents before him. And as we know, we don't want America just to be prosperous and thriving for a century, but we want to be thriving for centuries as a country, as an economy, with the economy in our country, because it not only affects us, the everyday American people, but it also affects the children. the safety, the communities. It all trickles down to that. And when you have an attorney general, or you have, like he said, attorney generals who prosecute based on their political views, they don't care about nothing but their self and their self. They're too busy self-consumed with themselves rather than the best interest of the American people. And that leads to a disaster. And as I go on to say, I believe why Tucker Carlson didn't go or wouldn't run for president, because, like I said, he's going to clean up behind so many presidents, for example, like Kamala Harris, if she was to get in office before him, and just metaphorically the contaminated water or the pollution that took place from these Democrats that have been controlling the entire government for the last 12 out of 16 years. And that requires so much cleanup political wise. Plus, as he's a sole proprietor, being in a capitalistic environment, he's thriving off his own business, and, he's reaching new heights, and, he's not a part of this communist thing, but he's thriving in this capitalistic environment where he's being competitive. He has his own podcast show, and he's a proprietor over his voice, that he can speak owning his voice and doesn't have to worry about adverse consequences political wise for saying certain things. Because as he's mentioned, attorney generals are prosecuting based on political views. So plus that takes a toll on anybody. But I just wanted to present that to you guys. I want to know you guys' perspective on this. Did Tucker Carlson hit it on the nail or not? Do you guys believe what he said was true? Because I definitely agree with everything he said with this messy propaganda and this race war that they continue to advocate for, and these identity politics when it comes to voting based on a pigment of skin instead of policy that they're not even talking about. Somebody has to ask this woman and hold this woman accountable and hear her with the hard-hit questions that everyday Americans face, because she's definitely running away from it. And she does a good job articulating her speech in regards of what individuals want to hear, engaging with emotions as individuals, and you cannot run a country based off emotion. There has to be logic, and you have to be logical. And first of all, she knows nothing about economics. And that's why the economy is a disaster, because she's a vice president right now, a sitting vice president. And if the economic policies that she's championing for are so awesome, are doing the thing in the best result of the American people and everyday American people, why aren't the results being shown that currently? And it leads up to my next segment of the show. We do have Jermaine Dupri. And I don't know if you guys know about Jermaine Dupri. And Jermaine Dupri was shamed by Roland Martin, this individual here. I will show you guys who Jermaine Dupri is in a minute as I exit out of this. So this is Jermaine Dupri. Jermaine Dupri is a music mogul. He was shamed by Roland Martin for not being with the identity politics and not being on code. And what I mean by code is definitely voting off of identity politics just because she's a black, strong woman, right? And he's an American producer, rapper, and songwriter. His first debut or an appearance on the big stage was the team hip-hop duo Criss Cross in 1991. Dupri also wrote and produced the hit Jump in 1992. He jump-started a lot of careers like rap artist Bow Wow, because Jermaine Dupri has a record label called So Def. And he had a show called The Rap Game, where he helped young kids be exposed to celebrities who already been up in the entertainment business, who already thrived and been successful in it, like successful rap artists, as they compete against each other, and the kids are competing against each other. And he's bringing visibility to these kids on his show called The Rap Game, if you guys haven't heard about it, to their singing or rapping. And whichever kid won first place signed with his record label, So Def, and got a record label chain. For example, rapper Mulatto, she's a young female rap artist who won one of his competitions. He basically instilled in her the practices on how to thrive in the entertainment business when it comes to being a female rap artist and knowing how to engage with the audience, stage performance and things like that. But if you guys don't care about none of that, the most important part is why I mentioned this individual. I just wanted to add some context on who he is. Besides that, Jermaine Dupri had a question we all have after watching the Democratic National Convention this past week. for Kamala Harris, as she is currently the sitting vice president, currently still. So let's check it out and then have a conversation, family.
Yo, out here getting these 5 miles in, as you see me do every day. Real quick, I want to talk about the DNC. I feel like the DNC has been going amazing, but I also feel like tonight, Kamala Harris has a pretty difficult job, right? And it's interesting because the Republican correspondent that's been doing the roundup after the DNC has ended, he asked the question that I kind of asked Kamala when we had our second meeting, if, the fact that she's in office right now, she's in the White House right now.
Correct.
And the guy, he said, what makes y'all believe that she's gonna get this stuff done if she becomes president and she's already in the House? And it's a tricky question because I asked Kamala basically the same thing, right? In so many words. And I asked her, like, as the vice president, why they don't let her talk when, Biden seems like he needed someone to speak up.
And I feel like that's a great question to ask. Why they don't let her talk when it feels like Joe Biden needs that assistance?
I thought that's what the role of the vice president was to help the president. And basically, she kind of let me know that her hands was tied, that they didn't really allow her to be a voice like that in that space. And tonight, I don't know if she's going to,
I feel like Jermaine Dupri is asking a great question. She is the vice president currently of the United States with an appointed responsibility. She has shown her incompetence as far as getting down to business, as she would say in her speech like she did recently. As she dodges big networks not to answer the uncomfortable questions she still will be held accountable for, and we as informed voters need to hold her accountable for it and asking the uncomfortable question when it comes to the borders. Because we're not just going to skip over that for the simple fact that the borders is a border crisis and it's the worst in history. Kamala wants us to believe what she say, but don't believe what we see. And that's not what we're going to do here. Because as we clearly see, it's affecting the everyday American people. So I feel like he had a great question in regards of why is she not doing these things now as a vice president currently being seated, and what's going to make the difference if she is in office if she's not doing nothing now as the current vice president. And then he said he spoke because all these individuals, these celebrities, all these big name individuals like Jermaine Dupri, they have Kamala Harris' number. They have each other numbers because he said he asked her the same question. And then also as the sitting vice president, when Joe Biden need assistance because we all knew that his cognitive ability was declining, why she didn't step in and give Joe Biden assistance? Great questions, man, because I have the same questions. Why? She never saw for the flow of migrants surrounding the border, which is a crisis under her. Worse in history, she never speaks on policy, the trash economic policy that's not based on knowing economics, everything that was done during the disaster of the Democratic National Convention, the scrambling and scraping to put it together, is nothing but the very thing they have been doing in the White House. The same thing that was displayed during the Democratic National Convention is displayed, and we clearly saw is being displayed of how they operate in the White House. Am I right or am I wrong? Can you guys disagree or not agree? How do you guys feel about me just saying that there? How do you guys feel about Jermaine Dupri and what he said? She spoke on no policy the same way as a sitting vice president. She done a bunch of nothing. She had one job, and that was the border. When you done nothing, you can't speak on nothing, and that's why she doesn't speak on policy. 3.5 years. Let's continue.
I want to see how if she even touches on this, because if she doesn't touch on it, that's the question that I feel like the people that that have mixed decisions about voting for her. This is one of the questions. This is the top question that they had. And like I said, this is what the Republicans are saying. And they never heard the part about her hands being tied. And if she says something about her hands being tied, then it makes it look like the White House or the Democratic Party didn't really want her to exceed. So she can't.
The Democratic Party didn't want her to succeed, not exceed, but we understand what you're saying.
Can't really say her hands was tied, but she does have to step into that space. This is something I do believe.
So 3.5 years, and this is what I get. This is what I ask, and I agree with everything he said. It's reasonable questions that should be asked. Why she is doing nothing now as a sitting vice president? Why is she not helping Joe Biden when it comes to assisting him when we know that he was somewhat being seen as having pre-dementia signs with his cognitive ability declining? And these were the same individuals that were being in denial about his cognitive ability declining. So 3.5 years, and it's the question I have now. 3.5 years, and if her economic policy is so good, she spoke about at the DNC, why the everyday American with inflation, job layoffs, massive crime, along with struggling families working hard to put food on the table, is being presented? Small businesses are crumbling. And if you ever realize it, a Congress member or a legislator has never been laid off. They make sure to continue to use our taxpaying dollars, though. Nonstop, frivolous spending to the top of the line. And that's why inflation is occurring, right? We don't advocate or hold them accountable for the taxpaying dollars, us as taxpaying citizens, and the taxpaying dollars that's being given to them to allocate. And all of these policies she championed, which is slim to none being proclaimed, is basically the same of what we already are. So she make them sound good, but where's the results that are so amazing from the economic policies that she mentioned currently this past week at the DNC and that she's constantly advocating for? And why is the risen issues we have, she doesn't want to answer on these issues if this economic policy is so good that she's championed, that's taking place currently right now, and we see the results? Why don't she want to answer and take full accountability and responsibility for the issues along with the results of this economic policy that she keep advocating for? That's my question as well. But she don't want to answer those. She run away from those, and we have to hold her accountable to answer these uncomfortable questions, right? And just with Joe Biden, getting back to him, as they were in denial about his cognitive abilities. He spoke at the DNC, and he was gone. Flew, he didn't stick around or nothing. Done with him. They used him as debate for views. Oh, he'll speak later. He was the last speaker as the sitting president. Totally disrespectful. 11:30 at night. Nobody's watching no more. Nobody's checking for the DNC no more. Especially during a work week where everyday Americans had to go to work, and you put the sitting president as the last speaker, as he was shouting and championing and talking about how him and Kamala Harris, he said, me and Kamala Harris were strengthening illegal immigrants. He said that. So this is what individuals are supporting. It sounds like to me, her saying her hands is tied, as she spoke to Jermaine Dupri, because he said they spoke. Sounds like she's kicking the trash down the aisle to me. And these are reasonable questions she needs to answer. Because what is she going to do different from what a lot of Americans are suffering from right now today? We all are suffering from these economic policies, no matter how you put it, because she's still tied to the Biden administration as one administration, no matter if she's trying to separate herself or not by kicking Joe to the side because they let him speak and still let him get on that podium and speak. And then he went on his way as a farewell speech. So I feel as though it's all to keep a certain demographic in power, and the people that will replace is just a representation of it. I don't know how you guys feel about that. I'm curious to get you guys' insight and perspective on it. And then the last segment of the show, we got Jessica Tarlov. She got a little bit sassy in regards of defending the Democrats. And I want to show you guys this in regards of, and get you guys insight and perspective on it. I want to show you guys this. As we all know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsed Donald Trump. He was an independent from my understanding. And most of his viewers and most of his voters, 5% of them, from what I saw, were actually Trump supporters that supported him the most. So I feel like from a candidate standpoint, it actually put Trump at a bigger advantage because now you have two individuals coming together in unison. And Robert F. Kennedy did say he doesn't agree on everything Trump says. He doesn't agree on everything Kamala say. But he is big on just want to sit down and have a conversation and talk about policies. And that's what's important. But I'm not going to do no more talking. I want to see you guys' perspective, and I want you guys to watch this segment of the show of the five reacting to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s decision to endorse Trump and so forth.
And I want to thank Bobby. That was very nice. That was really very nice. That's big. He's a great guy, respected by everybody.
All right, Jesse. You know, what was most interesting about RFK's speech was how he literally took down the Democrat Party as the party of censorship, the party that did everything to, negate free speech, that sued him, that fought him, that ridiculed him, that engaged in lawfare.
Oh, yeah. Also, come to find out, I did, and I want to fact check this because they sued Robert F. Kennedy. The Democratic Party sued Robert F. Kennedy Jr. way more times than they have won against Trump. And that shows you that election interference is real. And I believe it. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been sued how many times? He said he was sued, if I'm not understanding, I think like 56 times. I'm curious. I forgot. He had multiple lawsuits. He had multiple lawsuits against it from the Democratic Party that took place, which is wild. I don't see where it shows he has how many times he's been sued. All I do know, family, is I'm looking for it right now, but how many times? Lawsuits. Excuse me, family, but I just want to make sure I'm saying the right things. Kennedy's campaign faced 13 challenges from the Democratic groups in New York, including one challenge filed by the Democratic Alliance Super PAC in June. Yeah, he had faced it many lawsuits against the Democratic Party, and that's just mind blowing to me. This is mind blowing to me. They basically wanted to run him out. They wanted to run Robert F. Kennedy out of the race. So basically, the many lawsuits that they put against him, just like they were going to putting lawsuits against. If I'm not mistaken, it was like 56 lawsuits against Robert F. Kennedy, and it was only like 8 against Trump. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm always open to the possibility of being wrong. But that was mind blowing. Let's continue.
He makes a decision, though, to drop out only in the primary states, it seems. So will that little bit help Donald Trump?
The Trump campaign's saying this helps Trump. They're saying in the 7 battlegrounds he was polling between 3% and 5%. And if those votes now go away, they say Trump gets about 60% of those compared to what Harris would have gotten. And that translates to this, Judge, and this is big. In Arizona, that would mean 41,000 additional votes towards Donald Trump. That's like a lot bigger than the margin last time.
Right.
In Georgia, almost 20,000 more votes for Donald Trump. You remember how tight these margins are. These little shifts can really play a big role. Apparently, he went to the Harris campaign and flirted with them and said, hey, you want an endorsement? Because, maybe I could get a cabinet position. And then she just went dark.
Yeah, because I do recall that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., his running mate, they just wanted to sit down and have a conversation in regards to policies. It didn't matter what party. They're independents, you know. They just want to make sure that America is going in the right direction, having the best interest of the American people. And it just seemed that obviously you would go with the party who's obviously addressing policies more because their importance is policies. And Kamala Harris is talking nothing about policy, right?
So we went to the Trump campaign. I don't know if he's going to get a cabinet position. Knowing Trump, he may dangle.
And I did see individuals, sorry to cut it off, family. This is my last time pausing it. I did see that Donald Trump's son was actually interested speaking with Benny Johnson. Shout out to him. He's an amazing, informative brother. Shout out to that content creator. And congrats on him on his 4th child coming. That he spoke with Donald Trump's son, and they was talking about Robert F. Kennedy possibly being an individual to be appointed for the CIA. And the CIA is known for accessing information and being informative in regards of informing the American people with accurate truth and news. But as you can see, the CIA has went down because they're spilling messy propaganda and allowing the Democrats to do so. But let's continue.
Something and then never give it, or give him something and, Trump likes the action. That could be interesting to see RFK Jr. in a Trump administration. But Harris is saying, this is no big deal. That's not true. The numbers speak for themselves.
Well, Katie, Harris refused to meet with him. And he said, RFK was clear. There's a lot of things that he disagrees with Donald Trump on. And so it kind of speaks to this idea that the Democrats are so full of joy and unity. And yet Harris wouldn't even meet with him. And yet Donald Trump was supposed to be
And that speaks a lot because at the end of the day, that shows that Kamala Harris wants you to believe what she say rather than what you see. And on top of it, it's more so like, look, if you don't agree with me, then I don't want to talk with you. And you can disagree with someone because we all have worked with someone we may dislike, but at the end of the day, the work gets done. Do we really care about individuals liking each other, or do we care about individuals actually doing what's necessary for the American people?
This hater was willing to sit down with him apparently several times where they hashed out some of the issues. Speaks more for Donald Trump than the Democrats.
Yeah, it's a reflection of the Republican side of the political aisle willing to at least have a conversation about issues that they disagree with. Democrats just put up the stiff arm and don't want to talk about any of it. RFK Jr. shouldn't take it personally because Kamala Harris doesn't really meet with anybody. We're going to talk about that later in the show. But in terms of the numbers, Jesse's absolutely right. If you look at these swing states now, endorsements don't necessarily turn into votes. There's a lot of third-party candidates get votes from people who don't want to vote at all now because they don't agree with voting for either party, and that's fine. But in terms of swing states where elections are decided by very, very slim margins, thousands of votes, maybe tens of thousands of votes, he's looking pretty good in a lot of these states. Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin. Virginia is a really interesting one. He was taking up about 8% of the vote there. And if he gets some of those voters to go from him to Donald Trump, he could potentially win Virginia, especially since it's a very popular state in terms of who the governor is. But I think the most important thing is everybody's been trying to frame him like some kooky third-party candidate. Listen to what he actually has to say. Listen to what Nicole Shanahan, who was his vice presidential candidate, has to say about the censorship, about why they left the Democratic Party, about why is it that they were so afraid to have him even on the ballot, why they're suing to keep his name off of the ballot. That doesn't seem very democratic. You may even argue that that's how you win elections, but it's certainly not how you should operate as a party that claims to be standing up for democracy.
And, Jessica,
because it's called the hypocrites and they're corrupt. And if you don't agree with them, they want you to fall by the wayside. And like I say, we have a lot of people we may work with that we don't agree with. But we all had that individual we may not like, but we know they were going to get the job done. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. even mentioned that he don't agree with some things or a lot of things that Donald Trump, but they were able to sit down no matter how adverse or how difference of opinions and come together collectively, because that's what it's about, because the overall individuals that's going to be affected is the everyday Americans. I'd rather vote for an individual as an informed voter that'll be able to sit down and negotiate and have the best interests. Because look at it. If the Democrats, for example, don't want to sit there and talk with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., do you think if Kamala Harris sits and go negotiate with foreign leaders, like, for example, Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Putin doesn't agree with Kamala Harris, was she just going to stiff arm him and don't want to talk to him no more? You can't. How is that going to help us as the American people? How? I'm curious to get you guys' thoughts on it. Comment down below. I appreciate, the 2 viewers that's here and individuals that's rocking with me. I truly appreciate it wholeheartedly. I try to do the prayer hands wholeheartedly. Let's continue.
Wasn't just talking about, being sued, but he talked about real censorship in a portal that was set up in the White House with the FBI, the DHS, the CIA, where all the information about him came in. Look, the fact that the Democrats wouldn't even give him Secret Service protection when his own father and uncle were assassinated. I mean, it really, he took down the Democrat Party, talked about the military-industrial complex and the wars that go on that didn't go on when Donald Trump was there.
Well, he didn't take down the Democratic Party. If the election was held today, it's a coin flip and probably advantage Harris. So we seem to be doing okay without him. And his values do not coincide with our values anymore. He's willing to betray things that were core to.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's called having a conversation. So even though his values is okay, in this case, the Democrats were just solely wrong. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., even though his values don't agree with Donald Trump, as example and an example of leaders and leaders that I would choose as a strong leader to lead this country is, even if someone doesn't agree with you, you're still able to have a conversation for the best interest of the American people. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. doesn't agree with everything Donald Trump said, but Donald Trump still accepted for him to sit down and have a conversation. So at the end of the day, Jessica, she's just all wrong in this. Jesse is all wrong in this because at the end of the day, she's basically saying, "Oh, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we don't agree with what he's saying, and he don't align with our values." And it shows the corruptness. It shows that at the end of the day, the Democrats, let alone the hypocrites, they don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to be asked the hard-hit questions because they're denying access to anybody to ask them a question. That's why they're avoiding the big networks and Donald Trump out here. And no matter what side of the fence you're on, family, you can definitely say that there's two sides of the fence. I mean, one side of the fence. But on one side of the fence, with these two parties, one is actually tackling policy and addressing what's affecting the everyday Americans, and the other is not, and avoiding tackling those questions, let alone getting held responsible to be asked those questions. They're not even giving anybody the opportunity to ask them the hard-hit questions, but they want their vote. The Democrats want voters to vote for them, but they don't want to they don't want to answer the questions. So what does that tell you right then and there? They're interviewing each other. Tim Walz and Kamala Harris interviewed each other.
Who he is. You knew him from Westchester, an environmental lawyer, someone who cares deeply about saving the planet from climate change, something that Donald Trump doesn't care about at all. He's someone who purports to care about a woman's right to choose. Donald Trump sent it back to the states. There are women bleeding out with,
okay.
Okay. I get.
Yeah, but that's not.
But it is. That's why Harris wouldn't meet with him.
Why? You know why she didn't meet with him? She doesn't talk to anybody. Who are you kidding?
I'm not kidding anyone. I'm being truthful about it. He is anti-vax, which is dangerous. And everyone.
He's not completely anti-vax.
He's just 90% anti-vax.
No, he is not.
Listen,
Were you happy you got the vaccine from COVID? I mean, really?
Yeah, I was. I had it one time.
That's great. Don't force everyone else to do what you want to do.
All right. Anyway, you said, Donald Trump's supposed to be a hater, but look at him. And, he extended an olive branch. He did it because, like Kamala Harris said, he has only ever served one client, himself. This is what he said about RFK just in April. I'd even take Biden over Jr. His views on vaccines are fake, in all caps, as is everything else about his candidacy. Let the Democrats have RFK Jr. They deserve him.
All right, well, Jessica, she called Biden a racist and then joined his ticket. People do that in politics.
Okay. I'm just saying that it is.
Exactly.
He knows that he can have a better shot at winning by taking him on. There's nothing genuine about this. It's not because he's good-hearted.
What Donald Trump thinks. What do you think, Tyrus?
Well, the reason why she's not going to talk to him is because all he wants to talk about is policy. So, and we're still waiting to hear.
Exactly. She's trying to that's what I'm saying. The Democrats, everything that talked about at that Democratic National Convention was that Donald Trump is a bad person. The borders, the illegal immigrants coming over, everything is Trump fault. Even the war in Ukraine is Trump fault. I said Trump fault. Sorry, family. It's Trump fault. But at the end of the day, they're not taking accountability for nothing, and they've been in office for 3.5 years. And when Trump was in office, the fact is there were no wars. When Kamala Harris and Biden came in, there's the possibility of being a war, and not along. Actually, there is a war going on now, and they actually funded the war when it came to Israel. So what are we talking about here?
Those things. I think you can have a meeting, and they've had several meetings or a couple of meetings, and they aired out their differences, how the political process used to be. Two people who see things very differently, they sit down, they find common ground, like we don't agree on this and we agree on this. Unfortunately, we don't have it. Do I think there needs to be more candidates when we make a choice? Yeah, I would love to see a 4-party system or a 3-party system. I think the reason why not only did he not want to be the deciding factor in the swing states is that he also wants to recognize that you can challenge the status quo. He had over 1 million people. He's done things, not to the level, I'd say, a Ross Perot, but he's definitely got the idea of being a third candidate in the Americans. We're all thinking about it now. So it might not serve him in terms of what he's going to do as far as being a president or that, but it is going to make a lot of people start thinking, you know what, maybe we should form our own party and things like that. So I think he's done a lot of good, and I think it was a mistake, a tactical mistake not to meet with him. Because if they would have met with him, maybe they would have came with the same thing, because you can ask Hillary about the green vote. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Jill Stein is, yeah.
So shumming off.
It just shows how in denial the Democrats are, and they don't want to meet with nobody who doesn't have the same insight they do. And it's the same because their ignorance is they're so prideful, and their ignorance is at an all-time high. Their ignorance is so widespread amongst their party that at the end of the day, they don't want to meet with nobody who has a different perspective. And the whole point of having that dialogue is to bring value for the best interest of the American people. But there could be no value being brought in if you don't allow different perspective and insights, right? Because just like she mentioned, and she definitely honed in and basically grazed, or I should say, came at Jessica Tarlov, because she was like, oh, I'm glad you think you know what Trump thinks. Because at the end of the day, all they're doing is adding on personal attacks and coming at Trump. But they're not talking about anything they're going to do that's beneficial as a Democratic Party. And if they would have met with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., they would have maybe had a different insight, let alone a different perspective, and they could have took a better approach than this trash approach with their trash economic policy that they're tending to champion in the first place, right?
The extra party, and you lose Arizona, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. So it was a good thing Trump did what Democrats won't do, because to Judge's point, she won't talk to anybody.
Click here.
And that's what's important. We want a leader not to operate out of feelings and emotions and all of that, but we want a leader to operate out of the best way of the American people and negotiate, and even have those hard conversations that need to be had, and not trying to not talk to anybody because you don't want to talk to anybody. That's not the best way to lead the country. Justin Lyon, Jesus, Mr. Brunger is spewing his crap again. What crap are you referring to? But I'm also grateful for you interacting with me in the chat, and I'm actually taking the time to interact. But that was the last segment of the show, folks. I want to get you guys' perspective and insight on things, and see how you guys feel. How do you guys feel about Tucker Carlson and his take on the Democratic National Convention and Kamala Harris speaking? How do you guys feel about Jermaine Dupri, the music mogul, basically asking why isn't Kamala Harris doing the things that she needs to do, or putting those policies and implementing them now since she's the sitting vice president, and why she didn't help Joe Biden when he needed help, let alone his decline in his cognitive abilities. And then we just watched Jessica Tarlov basically get destroyed in regards of sitting here trying to bash Trump and basically support that the Democratic Party didn't even want to speak or talk to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and basically wanting to give him many lawsuits to take him off of the ballot. So I'm curious to get you guys' perspective on that and how you guys feel. And do you feel like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsing Donald Trump is a good move for Donald Trump? And will that help him lead in the polls, let alone win this election? Because most of the viewers that were for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., 5% that was for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was the crossover from Donald Trump. So how do you guys feel about all these things? How do you guys feel in regards of who should win the election? Should Kamala Harris win the election? Should Donald Trump win the election? Who do you feel like policies more support the best for the American people. You know what I'm saying? Do you guys support price gouging and giving $25,000 for first home time buyers? And how would it be funded? And do you guys believe that it will take care of itself, like Kamala Harris said, in regards of things being funded? I'm curious to get you guys' perspective, man. I see 3 viewers in here. I really want to get you guys' insight on things, because it's not more so that I agree with either side. It's always right from wrong. And at the end of the day, at some extent, somebody policies has to be the best interest of the American people, far more greater than the other party, right? And that's where I'm looking at it, and that's my stance on it. You know, so let me know what you guys are thinking, man. I'm curious. Did you guys love the Democratic National Convention? Did you feel like it was a disaster? I feel like it was a disaster. I feel like the Democratic National Convention was a disaster. And, yeah, man, that's all I can say about it. But, you know, do you have Justin, do you have something against Mr. Bohangles? I think that's how you say his name, right? You know what I'm saying? But if nobody got nothing else to say, I hope you guys, at least you could do, support me and hit the thumbs up. You know, it's free. It definitely helps that YouTube algorithm there, man. And I'm just curious, man. I just want to have a conversation. I'm just a young fella, you know, trying to be an informed voter. This is the election that I've been involved in and actually been informed in more than ever, and did my due diligence, a little on my research to, you know, be informed to actually vote, and not just vote based on the little things that I hear. You know, I'm actually doing more research than ever, 25 years on this earth. But I just see how the everyday American people is being affected, man. And the way to have the voice be heard is obviously by voting. So I'm curious to get you guys' thoughts. I'm curious to get you guys' thoughts on it, man. So if nobody want to say nothing, I definitely, you know, nothing wrong with it. You know, I'm just glad and thankful for you watching me and rocking with me. And, you know, that be said, you know what I'm saying? But look, man, Gianni, she definitely chewed Jessica Tarlov apart, you know, and I feel like Robert F. Kennedy supporting Trump definitely helped him win by a landslide, man. So with no further ado, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I am going to be out. Nobody has nothing to say. You know, I appreciate you guys for supporting me. And then with no further ado, family, as I always play my little exit jazz music, I hope you guys enjoyed the show, man. Peace. Until next time, family.